For Honor is a third-person medieval fantasy fighting game made by Ubisoft that has been released in 2017 on PC, PlayStation and Xbox. I played For Honor for around 100 hours back when it released, and since the game celebrates its 5-year anniversary in 2022, I thought this is a great time to jump back in and see how well it held up. So without any further ado, let's get into it. For Honor's flagship game mode is called Dominion, a 4 vs 4 mode where both teams fight to hold 3 objectives. 1 at the center that has minions and 2 at the sides. The main objective for a team is to reach 1000 points, which causes the enemy team to break. If a team is breaking, players on that team can't respawn anymore, and once every player of a breaking team is killed, the game is won. Points are gained by holding and capturing objectives, killing other heroes and minions, and reviving teammates. In my opinion, Dominion is a good example for great game mode design. It has a low skill floor and a high skill ceiling, which is crucial to attract new players, but at the same time keep veteran players engaged. As a new player, it is very easy to jump into a game and understand immediately what to do. Capture points and don't let the enemy capture points. But even at the highest level of play, there is tactical depth to it, and competitive tournaments are played on this mode almost exclusively. Matches last around 10 to 15 minutes, are fast paced and most importantly, fun. The respawn times are short and the maps are relatively small, so after a death, heroes are back in action in no time. Besides Dominion, For Honor offers another 3 team objective game modes. Breach is a 4 vs 4 castle raid, where the attacking team has to siege a castle and kill the commander, while the defending team tries to prevent this. Compared to Dominion, Breach games last significantly longer, are a bit less intuitive and hence a bit less popular. The other 2 remaining modes, Tribute and Deathmatch, are far less popular. Tribute is a 4 vs 4 mode, where teams have to secure offerings that spawn on the map, bring them back to their base, and make sure that they don't get stolen by the enemy team. Besides the team objective game modes, there are ranked duels, unranked duels and unranked 2v2s, each in a best of 5 format. All of these 7 game modes have skill-based matchmaking, which is crucial in a skill-based game like For Honor. All game modes can also be played against AI. For Honor also features a single-player story mode that takes about 7 hours to complete. I only recommend it if you're really interested in the lore or desperate for the rewards that its completion will give you. The game mechanics of the story mode never received an update and are quite outdated. The story and the gameplay itself is also relatively bland and not worth the time in my opinion. The meat of the game definitely lies in its multiplayer game modes. For Honor has a very unique combat design. If you really wanted to compare it to any other game or genre, I think traditional fighting games like Street Fighter or Tekken are what come closest to it. Obviously, in contrary to those traditional fighting games, For Honor is played in third-person view, and the game is not limited to 1 vs 1 fights. Combat in For Honor is played with a lock-on system. As soon as you lock onto an opponent, you can switch between 3 stances, which determine your attack and block direction: left, right and upwards. The nuances of the combat system are quite complex for a third-person game, so don't expect Assassin's Creed level of melee combat depth. There are light attacks, heavy attacks, zone attacks, enhanced attacks, unblockable attacks, undodgeable attacks, guard breaks, bashes, attack chains, hyper armor, feints, blocks, parries, deflects, dodges and more. So, do you need to know how to apply and counter all these things to be able to have fun in these games, you might ask now? Well, it's not absolutely necessary, but you at least want to play through the combat tutorial and have a basic understanding of how the combat works. Due to the skill-based matchmaking, the game is as casual or as tryhard as you want it to be. Also a big part of For Honor's combat are so-called feats, which are active and passive skills that each hero has. Feats are active in every game mode except duels and 2v2s, and get unlocked one by one throughout a match, whereas the better you perform, the faster you will unlock them. I like the idea of having different builds on a certain hero, but the general community consensus currently seems to be that the feed system is not very well balanced. What I don't like about it is how much impact some of these skills have and how often they take the focus away from the core combat system. Generally, combat in For Honor, I think, is best described as equally frustrating and rewarding. Losing to some cheese strategy that you can't counter yet because of missing knowledge or muscle memory is not uncommon and can make you wanna rip out your fingernails. Missing one single tight input timing can expose you to a seemingly endless chain of bashes and mix-up traps. But oh boy, does it feel good if you manage to outplay and outsmart your opponent in this game. Offense in general is pretty strong, and you need decent reaction speed to defend against lots of stuff. Furthermore, if you have, let's say, less than 100 hours in this game, it is very likely that you don't know every hero and their moveset, but opponents, more often than not, know their own movesets rather well, or at least better than you. This also makes defending against enemy-specific maneuvers often difficult when you start out. If you really wanna dive deep into For Honor's combat, there are lots of good resources to learn from, be it For Honor YouTubers or community forums like the competitive For Honor subreddit. Learning the game means learning mechanics, hero movesets, matchups, mix-ups, punishes and more. It's pretty much the same how you would approach improvement in a traditional fighting game. It is a process that takes a lot of depth, time and thinking. One point that I want to mention here in this context, and I know this is not something that can be fixed or balanced, but comes with the nature of For Honor's combat system, is how clunky the combat feels whenever there are more than 2 people involved in a fight. As soon as there is an uneven number in a group fight, regular combat switches to its own minigame, where players are awkwardly trying to defend themselves against multiple opponents and fill up their revenge meter, which when activated gives them superhuman mode for a few seconds. This revenge system is a cornerstone of the team modes. It doesn't remove the clunkiness, but it minimizes 1vx slaughters and is probably the best solution for an unsolvable problem. Without it, the game would be completely unplayable, because the combat system doesn't really allow you to fight multiple opponents at once comfortably. In general, I think most people would agree that combat and hero balance in For Honor has been heavily improved since release, as many heroes and mechanics have been completely reworked since then. This obviously doesn't mean, however, that there is no room for improvement. I remember when I bought For Honor 5 years ago, I was completely blown away by how good the game looked visually. And 5 years later, I think the visuals are still a major contributor to For Honor's success. The character design is absolutely fantastic, both from a modeling and animation standpoint. There are now, at the time of making this review, 30 different heroes to choose from, all with a completely unique moveset and customization options. 2022 also brought a 5th faction to the game, the Outlanders. Ubisoft's plan here is to give themselves more freedom when it comes to character design, and I'm really curious with what they will come up with in the future. The design theme of For Honor is a mixture between medieval and fantasy, a real mainstream genre if you think of brands like The Witcher, Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings. The combat animations are cinematic and often exaggerated. Attacks feel heavy and impactful. Sound design is also well done, although more hero voice lines would be nice. Let's have a quick listen. During a match, For Honor shows you lots of information on the screen. And even though it affects the immersion somewhat, most of it is useful and can be easily processed. The UI can also be customized to a certain degree or fully disabled. Performance-wise, the game runs pretty well, even on relatively outdated PC configurations, which ironically is part of the only performance issue I had. Namely, long loading times. Whenever there is someone in my game that decides to play For Honor on his 15-year-old toaster, Map loading times skyrocket, and waiting more than a minute to load into a map is not a rarity. Finally, it is worth mentioning that Ubisoft switched the networking from peer-to-peer connections to dedicated servers back in 2018, which I remember was a huge community request back then. For Honor wouldn't be a Ubisoft game if it didn't have a well thought out progression system that tries to make you play the game more often and for longer periods of time. Players are showered with different rewards after every game to give them a sense of accomplishment as well as something to grind for. Daily quests, which are easy to complete, are the prime source of steel for Honor's main in-game currency that is used for buying cosmetic items as well as unlocking heroes. Yes, you heard right. Unless you buy the complete edition, you need to unlock all the heroes in For Honor, with the exception of the 3 main characters, which are Warden, Raider and Kensei. Ubisoft currently sells 4 different editions of the game, whereas the only real difference between them, besides an arcade mode that you can only get with the Marching Fire and Complete Edition, is how fast you unlock heroes. Unlocked heroes can be leveled up and customized, whereas higher level heroes get access to more and better looking cosmetics. The other main progression, besides unlocking heroes, leveling them up and making them look shiny, is the player skill progression. Personally, I think For Honor is best enjoyed semi-casually, somewhere in the middle of the skill curve. Being at the absolute bottom of the skill curve and constantly dying without understanding what happened is frustrating. But I also watch some high level gameplay and think that playing the game at a very high level is also not the most enjoyable thing, at least for the vast majority of players. Ubisoft is still actively developing For Honor 5 years after its release. 2022 brings 4 unique seasons with several events and a second and third new Outlander hero. The ongoing development is funded by game sales, battle passes, character DLCs and an in-game currency shop. For Honor's player count seems still to be healthy in 2022. This is very important, as live support multiplayer games heavily rely on having enough players to ensure quick queue times, as well as creating enough revenue to cover the cost for development and upkeep. It is really hard to find a reliable source for overall player numbers. We know that the vast majority of players plays on console, and the game does not offer crossplay functionality. The PC player numbers have been relatively constant and healthy throughout the past 3 years. Steam charts shows an average of around 3,500 players at the start of 2022, and if you consider the non-Steam player base, you probably get somewhere around double that number for a total average PC player base. So definitely enough to find Dominion, Breach and duel matches quickly, at least in Europe and North America. A term that is often heard in combination with For Honor is player toxicity. In my experience, however, I very rarely encounter overly toxic behavior that goes beyond some emote spam or passive-aggressive auto messages. For a skill-based online PvP game, the toxicity levels don't seem to be too bad. And for those who really don't want to take the chances and experience any kind of toxicity, there is always the possibility to mute the chat and act like everyone is an NPC. So, is this game worth playing in 2022? Well, it obviously depends what you're looking for. For Honor is not your typical Ubisoft RPG with hack and slash combat, but rather a relatively complex fighting game. Honestly, I was pleasantly surprised by how much fun I had while checking back on this game. It is definitely a one-of-a-kind game when it comes to art design and gameplay. And even though certain aspects can be very frustrating at times, I still think 2022 is a great time to hop in and enjoy it semi-casually. For Honor goes on sale regularly, and you can often get the standard edition for around $5 to $8. The game is also on Xbox Game Pass, but at this point in time only for consoles. Anyway guys, that's it for this review. Let me know in the comments what you think about For Honor in this day and age. I have more reviews planned in the somewhat near future, so if you enjoyed this video, then please leave a like and consider subscribing to this channel. As always, thank you all for watching, and I see you soon.